Okay, I've been mixing the chemicals. We've got our two different chemicals. We've got our ferric ammonium citrate and our potassium ferrocyanide. I listed right before this the ratios, and the ferric ammonium citrate is 25 grams of this to 100 milliliters of water. And this is, the potassium ferrocyanide is 10 grams to 100 milliliters of water. I call them solution A, solution B. They will eventually just be mixed in equal parts. So I have those ready to go. I've already put 100 milliliters in here. You can see 100 milliliters isn't a lot. This is gonna maybe do one class's worth, like 30 kids doing small prints, both of these together. But the nice thing is, until these are mixed together, they will last alone for a really long time. Just stick them in your refrigerator and they can last for like a year or two and still work just fine. Not until they're mixed together do they have to be used right away. So to do this, I just use a graduated something that just shows milliliters on here, and I'm just gonna measure 100. Put it in a container that has a lid. And this is the one that I need 25 grams of. I've got a scale here, maybe, and it's in pounds right now. So I'm gonna change it, make sure it's in grams right there. It's at 0. And I wanna get 25. $24, $25. Okay. There's nothing fancy about adding this to the water. Just put it in. And I'll shake this up in a little bit. Now I'm going to go ahead and wipe this out so there's no residue. That's fine. I can do my next chemical. And this one, the next one for the potassium ferrocyanide, I only need 10 grams. Pretty. And when they sell this, they always sell this in a smaller container. You know, it's the one that's heavier. You need less of. And there. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and put this in here, and then I'm going to wait till I'm ready with my paper to combine these two together. And when I mix these together, then I need to use that whole solution. If you're not gonna use the whole solution, I would suggest measuring it out and keeping these separated, just using what you need. When I did this with the whole 3 classes, I doubled this amount and I still had leftovers, so I'll just make sure this is mixed really good. And you can see they're just really different colors. This one takes a little while to stir in because it's like salt crystals kind of that have to dissolve, but you're ready just with those 2 things. All right. Okay, I have a variety of sizes of paper out here. I don't know what you're gonna need for your lesson that you're doing with your kids, but this isn't the heaviest weight watercolor paper. Heavyweight watercolor paper really holds well, like all of the liquid you're about to put on. But I did this before with fabric. I've done it with just pretty cheap paper. This is just cardstock, and it works good for the effects you need it to have happen. So what I'm gonna do, I still just have my graduated cylinder here, and I'm just gonna put in 50 milliliters and another 50 milliliters of each of these and just pour them in really carefully. This stuff isn't toxic. It can stain a little bit, but it's not going to hurt you if it gets on you. So I'm not wearing gloves, I'm not doing anything like that. So I'm just gonna put in some of solution A, ferric ammonium citrate. And this isn't the best pouring container, but okay, about 50 of that. And also notice in my classroom, I'm able to dim the lights on one half of the room and one half's off. For most lighting situations, I have the blinds all shut in the window, but right before I do this, this is gonna become light sensitive the second that these two mix together. So these lights, most tungsten lights and these halogen lights aren't going to affect this hardly at all. And so you'll have time to do what you need to do. As soon as I get these painted on, I am going to take these and I'm putting them, I just have these big plastic mats that they were thrown away at our school. And I'm just gonna place these on here. I'm gonna put them on a drying rack and put them in a closet that I can shut and just let them dry. You can speed up the drying process with a blow dryer or a little fan and kind of pick it up a little bit. But I found what worked really good for me is I just pre-treated all of my paper. You could even have your kids do it a time before, because once these papers are dry, you can just stack them up and store them. And I just use the really heavyweight leaf bags and I just wrap them in double layer of those and put them in that dark closet. And that will stay good. In fact, we even did cyanotype prints with some of the leftover cyanotype stuff that I had from 2 years ago in those bags because it still worked really well. So the paper will stay good for a long time as long as it is completely out of the light. If it's exposed to light at all, it's not gonna work. So I'm gonna add this next one and get ready to paint this solution on. It's gonna be kind of a greenish, light green color when these mix together. I'm dripping just a little. Another 50 milliliters going in here. And again, once you've mixed these two together, this isn't gonna store well. You could store it for maybe a day or two. If you put it in a light sensitive container, it would need to be like a black or a brown bottle to keep it from doing that. And I've got a few drips there I'm just gonna avoid. Okay, so this is mixed together. Now you can leave the edges white, you can paint the whole thing. I've just got a foam brush to kind of do this with. You could use, you know, just any watercolor brush would be really nice. I'm gonna kind of leave the edges sort of rough and fun. Kind of just make sure you get a nice coat on here. And it's so fun that this is such a fun bright green, but it's gonna change and become this really cool blue later. So here's the cardstock if you want to see what that's going to look like. I'm just going to put a coat on the whole thing. You can see just this tiny amount, it could do a lot of paper. I'm going to have some leftovers and I'll probably coat a bunch of paper when I'm done with this video just to have ready for projects for the kids. So I'll just do a few sizes here. Do a few different prints here. Or photograms, if you want to use the proper term. Okay, we'll call that good. Okay, I'm just going to be putting these on here to dry. They're a little curly now, but I will get them flattened up. And I'll use one more, and I'm just going to let these dry. In the meantime, while these sit in my dark closet and dry, I'm going to be gathering some items together that I think would be really fun to put on these to get that photographic process to take place. We'll find some good stuff. All right. Okay, my paper is dry and I have gathered some objects around. We went out and we found kind of some natural stuff right here. I've got my plastic mat so I can move things. My son is also making one. He's in 6th grade and he found kind of weird objects. Oh, you want my keys in there too? And he found some things, just maybe things I've taken from students, I don't know, that I have a drawer full of. But I want to introduce you to the star of the show, and that's these. These are what you can check out. These are our light boxes, and they just emit UV light. And so if you have a cloudy day like today, we definitely couldn't do this outside, and outside is really unpredictable and the wind blows and it's tricky. This will hold if the kids are doing really little prints. There's 2 of these. You can do a whole class at once. So you don't want to do really big things. It'd be like half sheets or quarter sheets of standard size paper. Here on the side, just so you know, there's a button that turns that on, and there's our UV light. Now I still have it nice and dim in here. because I'm about to bring out the paper. Right now I have it sitting here underneath this, just hiding under here. And when I do this with kids, I put their paper out and we hide it underneath a mat, and then they have their objects, and then we bring it out, and we do that all at once. So I'm gonna turn this over to my son to video for me, and I'll probably speed this up so you'll get to see it fast. All right. Okay, one more thing with the objects, you'll want to find things that will lay somewhat flat. You can get, if you have glass or plexiglass, but I don't have enough for a classroom set, and press it down on top, and it will take a bit of it'll make a better photogram for you, but they take a little longer. Sometimes that reflects a little bit of the UV light. So I'm just gonna place them. Sometimes it's the shadow you capture and you have softer edges on some things. I found some things that were kind of flat. You'll just kind of have to experiment. So I'm gonna use this bigger sheet of paper. You can see it kind of dripped and got thicker in places, and sometimes effects like that are really interesting. So I'm just gonna start arranging, and we talk about composition, or maybe with the students you're studying a specific thing, maybe energy transfer or something natural in the world, or maybe you're studying prehistoric dinosaurs and you want to use little dinosaur things. I just went out to my yard and found things stick. And there's one more thing that you can do. Partway through the exposure to the light, you can reach in and like shift things a little bit, and you'll end up with different values of that cyan blue happening, which can be really interesting. I've had students do that before, where they just like moved a little pop lid across and it just like went, you know, got lighter and lighter, and it was just really cool. So I don't know, maybe this will creep in from the side. A little twig. Maybe one more. And I wish I had a few things were sitting on. I might use this leaf instead. It sits a little flatter. Now some leaves let a little UV light through. All right, so I would call that done. It doesn't take very long to make your composition. The trick for this is moving it and getting it into there without things shifting. Sometimes they do. The kids don't usually really care too much. So I'm gonna go put mine in the light box, and then I'm gonna let Bodhi make his really quick, and we will let these get exposed. We're gonna expose these. It kind of depends on the paper and how saturated they are, but it's usually around 8 to 10 minutes in the light box. The thing I usually like to do is a little test paper that's just right at the edge, and I'll pull it out every once in a while and just kind of peek in there. And once they start getting kind of a bronzy sort of film on the surface, you know they're fully exposed. So some people, like really professionals, like to pull them out at very specific shades of blue. We're not going to be that picky. We just want to get them exposed. All right. All right, while those are getting exposed in the light box, I'm just making sure sinks are ready. Of course, I've done this before where I've had series of buckets ready with water for the kids, but I want you guys specifically to watch how we're gonna wash these out. I have one more thing, and this is an optional thing. Here at the end of the sinks, I've got one more. It's just full of like an inch of water, and I'm gonna put a good splash of hydrogen peroxide in here. It's not really like needing to be super exact. The hydrogen peroxide in here will make the reaction happen super fast, so they don't have to just wait for it to dry to see this cyan really appear. They'll see it pretty good right here at the beginning. It happens quite quickly, but this just suddenly brightens it, and it's just really fun for the kids. So one more dip into this, a splash of hydrogen peroxide and just a little bit of water. Okay, we've had 10 minutes go by, maybe even a little bit more, because I was running some test ones in here. I'm gonna start pulling these out. I'm gonna pull these out first. And I just like to tell the kids, dump them quick. Now, I usually have a box for them to dump in. And then right here, I just have a sink full of water. And this is what I show them. They're not rubbing the paper ever. They're just letting it swim back and forth for a little while. And as you have this, you'll have someone else I have somebody at the other sink ready to go. And you get kind of the designs of how it was painted on a little bit, but it'll all. So you're getting those, they're iron salts washed out of here. That's just a little bit of the first bit out. And then I have them just run cold water on top, and they don't even touch it. I just tell them, make sure the water's running over the whole thing and just let it run. And some people use distilled water for this, but for kids' prints, I think it's okay. We should be trying to get this yellow kind of gone. This is the watercolor paper I'm doing right now, but if they rub it and rub the surface, they're gonna like ruin the paper. So they want to spend about a minute on one side of the sink and another minute on the other side. So this is the process that takes the longest. I have 2 sinks, but like I said, I usually have buckets set up with huge big tubs with big amounts of water that this can be done also in other places. Then this is putting this into the hydrogen peroxide bath. It changes it to the deeper blue really, really fast. And this is what's fun for the kids to see. This would happen on its own as it dries. You see how you then get that rich, and it's almost even a black over here. So these leaves weren't sitting flat. You can see this is where they were lifted up and you get those soft edges. This is where it was really close. And you get these it's kind of a haunting one. Okay, I'm gonna do the rest and then I'll show those to you when we're done. All right, so here's what we came up with. You can see some of Bodie's items that he had, UV light could pass through them. Some were kind of lifted up a little bit. I don't even remember what that one was. Yeah, he's got some pretty cool things. This one was a little crisper. Just some leaves. They didn't sit super flat. This is why glass can really make crisp prints. Right here, we must have had something on the paper where the cyanotype chemicals didn't absorb in. And then that's our first one that we had. You can see this is the cardstock, and it kind of the watercolor sort of makes a more even coating. The cardstock, you can kind of see the streaks of how we painted it, but it's never really bothered me for teaching this to the kids. So that's what we turned up with, and I'll show you some more examples that we've had from the past here as well. I have one more tidbit of information. In this is my 2 layers of this really thick black plastic. It's like the thickest I could find, and I roll it around it. So really this is probably wrapped in here 8 times on each side. It's really probably super dark in there. I still keep it in a dark closet, but this is the paper that I used the rest of that already mixed chemical in there, and it ended up doing just that. We did 50 of part A and 50 of B, making that 100 milliliters, and it did probably 50 to 60 just sheets of cardstock paper. So if I cut those down in half, that is totally enough to do a whole grade level. And honestly, it cost probably pennies of paper. This is a really affordable activity you can do with kids. It's fast, it's really rewarding. They think it's just magical and amazing. So that's how I wrap that up and store that.